Billionaire cried seeing single-dad janitor play with his 5 kids like no one else would. Before we dive into this incredible story, if you're touched by tales of family, redemption, and unexpected love, please hit that like button and share your own thoughts about the power of family in the comments below. Victoria Sterling's heels clicked against the marble floor of her $30 million Manhattan penthouse as she reviewed the quarterly reports on her tablet. At 27, she was the youngest female CEO in tech industry history, her artificial intelligence company valued at over $2 billion. The Wall Street Journal called her the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley, and she wore that title like armor. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford, family a weakness she'd learned to live without. Her employees feared her, competitors respected her, and absolutely no one knew that she cried herself to sleep most nights in her enormous empty bed. Tonight was supposed to be different, though. Tonight, she had finally hired a live-in household manager to handle the mundane aspects of her personal life so she could focus entirely on her next acquisition. Marcus Thompson stood in the service entrance of the Sterling penthouse. His 5 children clustered around him like ducklings. Lily, 6 years old with curious green eyes that seemed to see everything, held his hand tightly. The twins, 8-year-old boys named Noah and Nathan, whispered excitedly about the elevator that had brought them up 40 floors. Emma, 7, clutched her worn teddy bear, while little James, only 4, rode on Marcus's shoulders. They were all he had left in the world, and he was everything to them. Sarah had been gone for 2 years now, taken by a drunk driver on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, leaving him to raise 5 children on a contractor's salary that barely covered rent. This job, this position as household manager for some rich tech executive, it was their last chance. The pay would cover the children's medical bills, their education, everything Sarah had dreamed of giving them. Remember what we practiced, Marcus whispered to his children as they waited to meet their new employer. Best behavior, quiet voices, but his words were cut short as Victoria Sterling herself appeared in the doorway. She was younger than he'd expected, beautiful in that untouchable way that comes from never having to struggle for anything. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect bun. Her gray suit probably cost more than he made in 6 months. But it was her eyes that struck him most. Brown eyes that held a loneliness he recognized because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice crisp and professional, "I specifically requested that you come alone for this initial—" She stopped mid-sentence as her gaze fell on the children. "I apologize, Ms. Sterling," Marcus said quickly, his heart sinking. "The babysitter canceled last minute and I couldn't. I understand if you want to reschedule." Victoria stared at the 5 small faces looking up at her. The littlest one, perched on his father's shoulders, waved at her with a chubby hand and smiled. Something inside her chest, something she'd kept locked away for 20 years, suddenly stirred. "Daddy says you live in a castle in the sky," little James announced proudly. "Are you a princess?" Noah elbowed his little brother. "Don't be stupid, James. She's a CEO, that's way cooler than a princess." Lily stepped forward, those remarkable green eyes studying Victoria with an intensity that seemed impossible for a 6-year-old. "You look sad," the little girl said simply. "Even though you're smiling, your eyes look sad. My daddy's eyes look like that sometimes too, when he thinks we're not watching." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. This child, this tiny person had seen through her carefully constructed facade in seconds. "Lily," Marcus said, his face flushing with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Sterling. She's very perceptive, sometimes too much so." But Victoria found herself kneeling down to Lily's level, something she'd never done with any child before. "What makes your daddy's eyes happy again?" she asked softly. Lily smiled, a brilliant gap-toothed grin. "We do. When we're all together, when we play dragons and knights, when we make blanket forts, when we tell him we love him. Family makes the sad go away." Victoria stood abruptly, that locked thing in her chest threatening to break free. She hadn't thought about family, real family, in years. Her parents' bitter divorce when she was 7, the custody battle that turned her into a prize to be won rather than a child to be loved, the boarding schools and nannies and empty holidays. She'd built her empire on the ashes of her childhood, proving to everyone, especially herself, that she didn't need anyone. But watching Marcus gather his children closer, seeing the way they naturally gravitated toward him like planets around the sun, she felt that familiar ache she'd been running from her entire adult life. "The position," she said, clearing her throat and returning to her professional tone, "includes a suite on the 35th floor. I assume you'll need accommodations for your family. Marcus's eyes widened. You mean, you're not dismissing me because of the children? On the contrary, Victoria said, surprised by her own words. A man who can manage 5 children can certainly manage one household. When can you start? Immediately, Marcus replied, relief flooding his features. We can start immediately. As Victoria showed them to the service elevator that would take them to their new quarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just set something in motion that would change everything. Lily turned back to wave at her, and Victoria found herself waving back, a genuine smile crossing her face for the first time in months. I like her, Daddy, she heard Lily whisper, as the elevator doors began to close. She's lonely like us. Maybe we can be lonely together. The doors shut, but Lily's words echoed in Victoria's mind as she returned to her penthouse. Lonely together. Is that what family was? She poured herself a glass of wine and stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights below. Somewhere, 35 floors down, a father was tucking 5 children into beds in their new home. For the first time in 20 years, Victoria Sterling didn't feel quite so alone in her castle in the sky. She didn't know it yet, but in exactly 3 weeks she would discover a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about Marcus Thompson, about those 5 extraordinary children, and about the father she'd spent her entire life hating. 3 weeks had passed since the Thompson family moved into the Sterling Tower, and Victoria's carefully ordered life had been turned completely upside down. It started small, with childish laughter echoing through the normally silent halls, crayon drawings mysteriously appearing on her refrigerator, and tiny handprints on the windows she'd kept spotless for years. Marcus was excellent at his job, managing her household with military precision, but his children had a way of spilling into her world, despite his best efforts to keep them contained. She found herself working from home more often, telling herself it was for convenience, not because she'd grown addicted to the sounds of life filling her empty penthouse. It was a Thursday evening when everything began to unravel. Victoria had come home early from a board meeting, exhausted from another hostile takeover negotiation. She'd kicked off her heels at the door, ready to disappear into her study with a bottle of wine when she heard it. The sound of pure, unbridled joy coming from her bedroom, her master bedroom, her private sanctuary where no one, absolutely no one, was allowed. She padded silently down the hall, ready to unleash her famous temper, when the scene before her stopped her cold. Marcus was on her California king bed, all 5 of his children piled on top of him in a giggling heap. They were playing some sort of tickle monster game, and the pure joy on their faces, the way Marcus threw his head back and laughed. Really laughed. It was like looking at everything she'd never had. The tickle monster is coming for you, Emma, Marcus growled playfully, reaching for his daughter who squealed and tried to hide behind her brothers. Nathan and Noah were working together trying to pin their father's arms while James bounced on his stomach, and Lily, brilliant little Lily, was calling out strategic commands like a tiny general. Get his left arm, Noah. Nathan, watch out for the counterattack. The silk sheets Victoria had imported from Italy were wrinkled. Her perfectly arranged pillows were scattered everywhere, and there might have been cookie crumbs on her $8,000 duvet. She should have been furious. She should have fired Marcus on the spot. Instead, she found herself leaning against the doorframe, tears streaming down her face, watching a father love his children the way she'd always dreamed of being loved. That's when Lily spotted her. Those extraordinary green eyes locked onto Victoria's tear-stained face, and without hesitation the 6-year-old slipped off the bed and walked over to her. Why are you crying? Lily asked, reaching up to take Victoria's hand. Are you sad because you're alone again? The little girl's touch was warm, gentle, and Victoria found herself sinking to her knees, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Marcus had noticed them now, his face going pale as he realized where they were, what he'd done. Miss Sterling, I am so sorry. The cleaning service changed the linens today and the children begged to see the big bed, and I thought just for a minute. How? Victoria whispered, her voice breaking. How do you do it? How do you love them so completely when you know you could lose them, when you've already lost so much? Marcus climbed off the bed, his children following him, surrounding Victoria in a semicircle of concern. He knelt down beside her, his eyes, those kind brown eyes that mirrors her own loneliness, meeting hers with understanding. Because the alternative is not loving them at all, he said simply, and that would be the real loss. Sarah taught me that. She used to say that love isn't safe, it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be brave. Emma stepped forward, offering Victoria her teddy bear. Mr. Buttons helps when I'm sad, she said shyly. You can borrow him if you want. Noah and Nathan exchanged glances, then Nathan spoke up. Our mom used to say that crying means your heart is too full and it's leaking out your eyes. Is your heart too full, Miss Sterling? No, Victoria admitted, accepting the teddy bear and holding it close. My heart has been empty for so long I forgot what it felt like to have anything in it at all. James, the youngest, climbed into her lap without invitation, wrapping his small arms around her neck. We can fill it up, he announced with the confidence only a 4-year-old could possess. We're really good at loving people. We practice all the time. James, Marcus said gently. Ms. Sterling might not want. It's okay, Victoria interrupted, surprising herself by wrapping her arms around the little boy. It's more than okay. For the next hour, she sat on her bedroom floor while the Thompson children told her stories about their mother, about their old apartment, about their dreams and fears and favorite colors. Lily showed her a magic trick with a coin. The twins demonstrated their secret handshake. Emma sang a lullaby her mother used to sing, and James fell asleep in her arms, drooling slightly on her $2,000 blouse. Marcus watched it all with a mixture of wonder and something else, something that looked dangerously close to the feeling that had been growing in Victoria's chest since the day they'd met. I should get them to bed, he finally said as the clock struck 9. School tomorrow. As he gathered his children, Lily tugged on Victoria's hand. Ms. Sterling, would you maybe want to have dinner with us tomorrow? Daddy's making spaghetti and we always make too much. Victoria looked at Marcus, who was trying to balance a sleeping James while herding the others toward the door. I wouldn't want to impose, she said carefully. You wouldn't be imposing, Marcus said, his voice soft. You'd be. Welcome. Very welcome. After they left, Victoria sat alone in her bedroom, looking at the chaos they'd left behind, the rumpled sheets, the scattered pillows, the lingering scent of children's shampoo and Marcus's cologne. For 20 years, she'd kept her space perfect, controlled, empty. Now, for the first time, it felt like a room where people had been happy. She picked up a pillow from the floor and held it close, breathing in the scent of family, of belonging, of everything she'd convinced herself she didn't need. Tomorrow, she would have dinner with them. Tomorrow, she would take another step towards something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. But tonight, she pulled out her laptop and did something she'd sworn she'd never do. She opened the file her private investigator had compiled years ago, the one about her father, Robert Sterling, the man who'd abandoned her and her mother when she was 7. She'd hired the investigator out of spite initially, wanting ammunition for the anger she carried like a shield. But she'd never opened the file, afraid of what she might find. Now, with the echo of children's laughter still hanging in the air, she clicked on the first document. What she found there made her blood run cold. A birth certificate for a boy named Marcus Robert Sterling, born exactly 7 years before her, son of Robert Sterling and a woman named Patricia Thompson, her half-brother. Marcus was her half-brother, the man she'd been falling for, whose children had awakened something in her she'd thought long dead was her brother. The room spun around her as she clicked through more documents. Their father had been married to Patricia first, had Marcus, then left them for Victoria's mother, a younger, wealthier woman. Patricia had changed her son's last name to Thompson after the divorce, had moved across the country to escape the scandal. The dates, the places, the ages, it all lined up perfectly. Victoria ran to the bathroom and was violently sick, her mind reeling with the implications. But as she sat on the cold marble floor, another document caught her eye. A medical report from 2 months ago attached to Marcus's employment background check. All 5 of his children carried a rare genetic marker, one that could develop into a fatal condition without early intervention. A condition that required a very specific type of bone marrow donor, a donor who would need to be a close blood relative, a donor like an aunt. The walls of her penthouse seemed to close in as Victoria realized the magnitude of what she'd discovered. Somewhere below her, Marcus was tucking in 5 children who might be dying, children who were her nieces and nephews, while she sat here holding the information that could save them. And Marcus, did he know? Had he sought her out deliberately? Or was this all some cosmic joke, fate's way of forcing the Sterling family to confront its buried secrets? The dinner invitation hung between them for 3 days before Victoria finally gathered the courage to accept. She stood outside the door to Marcus's suite, holding a bottle of wine she'd probably paid too much for, and wearing jeans for the first time in 5 years. Her hands trembled as she raised them to knock, the weight of her secret threatening to crush her with each passing moment. She'd spent 72 hours researching the genetic condition, consulting with the best specialists in the country under the guise of potential charitable work. The prognosis without treatment was grim. The hope with the right donor was extraordinary. She could save them. But first she had to survive this dinner without revealing that she knew the man serving her spaghetti was her brother, Ms. Sterling. James yanked the door open before she could knock, bouncing on his toes with excitement. "You came. You really came. Daddy said you might be too busy, but Lily said you'd come because you promised, and Lily's never wrong about important stuff." The 4-year-old grabbed her hand and pulled her inside before she could respond. The suite was smaller than her bedroom, but it felt like a real home. Children's artwork covered the walls, mismatched furniture created cozy spaces, and the smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the air. It was chaos and warmth and everything her penthouse wasn't. Marcus emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron that said, "World's okayest dad," clearly a Father's Day gift from his kids. His face lit up when he saw her, and Victoria felt her heart fracture a little more. How could she not have seen it before? They had the same eyes, the same stubborn chin, even the same way of tilting their heads when thinking. "You came," he said softly, echoing his son's words but with far more meaning behind them. "I said I would," Victoria replied, proud that her voice remained steady. "And I always keep my promises." Lily appeared at her side, slipping her small hand into Victoria's free one. "I helped make dinner," she announced. "I measured all the spices perfectly. Daddy says I have a gift for precision." There it was again, that unsettling intelligence in those green eyes, like the little girl could see straight through to Victoria's soul. "She reads at a 4th grade level," Marcus said with quiet pride. "Tests off the charts in pattern recognition and logical reasoning. The school wants to skip her ahead, but I want her to have a normal childhood as much as possible." Normal? Victoria almost laughed at the irony. Nothing about these children's lives would be normal if her research was correct. The genetic condition, Havelford syndrome, typically manifested between ages 8 and 12. The twins were already in the danger zone. Without intervention, they had maybe 5 years, 10 at most. "Where are the others?" Victoria asked, needing to shift her thoughts away from the ticking clock in her head. "Noah and Nathan are setting the table," Lily reported. "They're having a competition to see who can fold napkins better. Emma's in her room finishing homework. She takes forever because she draws pictures in all the margins." As if summoned, Emma appeared, clutching her homework folder. "Ms. Sterling, look, I drew you." She held up a math worksheet where, indeed, the margins were filled with a surprisingly good sketch of Victoria. But in the drawing, Victoria was smiling and surrounded by hearts and flowers and what appeared to be the Thompson children holding her hands. "It's beautiful," Victoria managed, her voice thick with emotion. "You're very talented, Emma. Mom was an artist," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Daddy says I got her hands." Lily got her brain, the twins got her mischief, and James got her smile. "What did your daddy get?" Victoria asked before she could stop herself. Emma considered this seriously. Her heart. Daddy got Mommy's heart. That's why it hurt so much when she left. The simple honesty of it took Victoria's breath away. She looked at Marcus, who was watching his daughter with such love and pain mixed in his expression that Victoria had to look away. This was her brother, this man who loved so deeply, who'd lost so much, who'd been abandoned by their father just like she had. Only he'd been old enough to remember it. Dinner was beautifully chaotic. The twins did indeed compete over everything from who could eat faster to who could make Victoria laugh first. James insisted on sitting in Victoria's lap halfway through the meal, getting spaghetti sauce on her designer jeans. Emma told elaborate stories about her classmates that may or may not have been entirely fictional, and Lily watched everything with those knowing eyes, occasionally making observations that were far too astute for a 6-year-old. "You know what I noticed?" Lily said, as Marcus was clearing the plates. "You and Daddy have the same smile. Not the mouth part, but the eye part. When you really smile, not the pretend smile you do sometimes, your eyes crinkle the same way." The room went quiet. Victoria felt Marcus freeze behind her. Even the twins stopped their bickering to look between the two adults. "Lily reads a lot about body language," Marcus said quickly, his voice slightly strained. "She's fascinated by genetics, too. Keeps checking out library books about DNA and heredity." "Really?" Victoria said, her heart hammering. "That's quite advanced for a 6-year-old. Our teacher says I'm exceptional," Lily said simply, no pride in it, just stating a fact. "She says my brain works differently than other kids. I see patterns everywhere, like how you touch your necklace when you're nervous the same way Daddy touches his watch." Victoria's hand immediately dropped from her necklace, her mother's necklace, one of the few things she had left from before the divorce. Marcus was indeed touching his watch, an old worn piece that looked out of place with his careful appearance. "This was my father's," Marcus said quietly, noticing her gaze. "Only thing he left behind." Victoria wanted to scream. Their father, their lying, abandoning, cowardly father, who'd left them both with holes in their hearts that no amount of success could fill. Instead, she said, "It's nice that you have something to remember him by." "I don't know if nice is the word I'd use," Marcus said with a bitter laugh, "but it reminds me of what not to become. I'll never leave my kids. Never." The fierce conviction in his voice made Victoria's chest tight. She thought of the medical reports hidden in her safe, the test results she'd already arranged for herself. She was a match. A perfect match. She could save all 5 of them if needed. But first, she had to tell Marcus the truth. "Daddy, can we show Ms. Sterling the fort?" Nathan asked suddenly. "What fort?" Victoria asked, grateful for the distraction. "We built the most epic blanket fort in the history of blanket forts," Noah explained. "It takes up our entire bedroom. Even Daddy fits inside. It's where we go when we miss Mom," James added quietly. "It feels like being hugged." The fort was indeed epic. They'd used every spare sheet and blanket to create a massive structure that covered most of the twins' bedroom. String lights provided a magical glow inside, and pillows created a soft floor. The children piled in, insisting Victoria join them. She found herself in the center of the fort, surrounded by all 5 kids while Marcus sat at the entrance, too big to fully fit but clearly not wanting to be left out. "This is where we tell secrets," Emma whispered. "The fort keeps them safe." "I have a secret," Lily announced, and Victoria's blood ran cold. Those green eyes were looking right at her. "I know why Miss Sterling is sad. It's because she's lonely, but she doesn't have to be anymore. We're going to be a family. I can feel it." "Lily," Marcus warned gently, "we've talked about this. Miss Sterling is our friend, but—" "No," Lily interrupted, something she rarely did. "It's more than that. Can't you feel it? We're connected, all of us, like pieces of a puzzle that finally found each other." Victoria couldn't breathe. This extraordinary child with her exceptional mind. Did she know? Could she somehow sense the truth? "Sometimes," Victoria said carefully, "people find their family in unexpected places." "Yeah," James said, curling up against her side. "Like how we found you." As the children slowly dozed off in the fort, Victoria and Marcus carefully extracted themselves, working together to cover the sleeping kids with blankets. They moved to the living room and Marcus poured 2 glasses of wine from the bottle she'd brought. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for this, for giving us a chance. I know we're not the typical employees and the kids can be overwhelming." "They're perfect," Victoria interrupted. "All of them. And you're an amazing father, Marcus." He smiled, that sad smile that she now recognized as her own. "I'm just trying to give them what I never had. A parent who stays." The opening was there. She could tell him now, could reveal that they shared more than just abandonment issues, that they were bound by blood and DNA and a father who'd failed them both. But looking at him, seeing the peace in his face for the first time since they'd met, she couldn't do it. "Not yet. I should go," she said, standing. "Thank you for dinner, for everything." Marcus walked her to the door, and for a moment they stood there, the air charged with things unsaid. "Victoria," he said, using her first name for the first time, "I need to tell you something about why I really took this job, about the kids." "Tomorrow," Victoria said quickly, not ready for whatever confession was coming. "Whatever it is, tell me tomorrow." She left before he could respond, before she could change her mind and confess everything. Back in her penthouse, she stood at her windows looking down at the city, holding her phone with the number of the specialist who could start treatment immediately. Tomorrow she would tell him they were family. Tomorrow she would reveal that she could save his children. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, she held on to the memory of being in that blanket fort, surrounded by the nieces and nephews she'd never known existed, feeling for the first time in her life what it meant to belong. She didn't know that Marcus stood 5 floors below, holding a medical report with her company's name on it, having discovered that the CEO who'd hired him was the anonymous donor who'd already paid for all his children's future treatment. He didn't know she was his sister, but he knew she'd saved them, and he was falling in love with her anyway. The next morning arrived with an email that made Victoria's blood run cold. Marcus had requested an urgent meeting in her office, and attached to his message was a document from Havelford Medical Center. the very facility where she'd anonymously arranged treatment for his children. Her hands shook as she prepared for the confrontation. Knowing that he'd discovered at least part of her secret, she'd barely slept, spending the night researching their father, discovering that Robert Sterling had died 3 years ago, taking any chance of reconciliation or answers to his grave. But he'd left something behind, a letter for each of his children, held by his lawyer with instructions to deliver them only when the siblings found each other. The lawyer had been trying to locate Marcus for years. Marcus arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, and the moment Victoria saw his face, she knew everything had changed. Gone was the warmth from last night's dinner. In its place was a mixture of confusion, anger, and something that looked heartbreakingly like betrayal. He placed a folder on her desk with deliberate precision. $73 million, he said, his voice carefully controlled. That's what the treatment for all 5 of my children will cost over the next decade. $73 million that was mysteriously paid in full by an anonymous benefactor the day after I started working here. Victoria remained silent, her CEO mask firmly in place even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The hospital wouldn't reveal the donor's name, Marcus continued, but they did accidentally leave a routing number visible on one document, a routing number that traces back to VS Technologies. To you. He leaned forward, his brown eyes, their father's eyes, boring into hers. What kind of game are you playing, Victoria? Did you research me before hiring me? Did you know about my children's condition? Is this some elaborate form of charity, keeping the poor single father and his sick kids as pets? It's not charity, Victoria said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. And you're not pets, you're... She stopped, the word family dying on her lips. How could she tell him like this when he was looking at her with such hurt and suspicion? Then what? Marcus demanded. Why would you spend $73 million on strangers? Nobody does that. Nobody is that generous without wanting something in return. Maybe, Victoria said carefully. I saw something in your family that reminded me of what I never had. Maybe I wanted to help because I could. Bullshit, Marcus said, and the profanity was shocking coming from him. I've seen how you look at us, at me. There's something else, something you're not telling me. Lily's words from the night before echoed in Victoria's mind. We're connected, all of us, like pieces of a puzzle that finally found each other. The 6-year-old had sensed what neither adult had been brave enough to voice. You're right, Victoria admitted, standing and walking to her window, unable to face him directly. There is something else, something that will change everything. But before she could continue, her office door burst open. Emma stood there, tears streaming down her face, with Lily right behind her. Daddy, Emma sobbed. James fell. He won't wake up. The school called and... Marcus was already moving, his confrontation with Victoria forgotten. Where is he? The hospital, Lily said, her usual composure cracking. They took him to Mount Sinai. The twins are with the neighbor. Victoria grabbed her keys without thinking. I'll drive. My car's faster. The ride to the hospital was a blur of red lights and Marcus's desperate prayers. Victoria broke every traffic law in existence while Emma sobbed in the back seat, and Lily held her sister, those green eyes now filled with fear instead of wisdom. At the hospital, they discovered James had suffered a seizure, the first sign that Havelford syndrome was manifesting earlier than expected. The 4-year-old lay unconscious in a pediatric ICU bed, looking impossibly small among all the machines. This shouldn't be happening yet, Marcus said, his voice broken as he held his son's tiny hand. The doctors said we had time. He's only 4. The youngest recorded onset was 7. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the specialist Victoria had secretly consulted, entered the room. She recognized Victoria immediately but kept her composure. Mr. Thompson, the early onset is concerning, but not unprecedented. The good news is that James is already approved for treatment. We can begin immediately. How? Marcus asked, confused. I haven't even been tested as a donor yet. The anonymous donor who covered the costs also provided a detailed genetic profile. Dr. Hernandez explained carefully. They're a perfect match for all 5 children. We can have the bone marrow ready within hours. Marcus turned to Victoria, understanding dawning in his eyes. It's you. You're the match. That's why you paid for everything. You knew you could save them. But there was more confusion than anger now. How? How are you a perfect match for all 5 of my children? The odds of that with a stranger are astronomical. Victoria looked at James's pale face, at Emma still crying quietly, at Lily watching her with those penetrating eyes. The truth couldn't wait any longer. Because I'm not a stranger, she said. the words feeling like they were being ripped from her chest. I'm your sister, Marcus. Robert Sterling was my father, too. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at her, his face cycling through disbelief, shock, and a dawning horror. No, he said flatly. That's not. My father's name was Thompson. Your mother changed it after the divorce, Victoria said, pulling out her phone with the documents she'd found. Look, your birth certificate. Your original name was Marcus Robert Sterling, born 7 years before me. Our father left you and your mother for mine. I have all the documentation. Marcus took the phone with shaking hands, scrolling through the proof of their connection. Emma had stopped crying, looking between them with wide eyes, but it was Lily who spoke first. I knew it, she said simply. That's why you have the same eyes, the same smile, the same way of standing when you're upset. Your family, real family. Marcus dropped into a chair, the weight of the revelation crushing him. You knew. This whole time you knew we were related? No, Victoria said quickly. I only found out 3 days ago. After dinner I was looking through some old documents and, Marcus, I swear I didn't know when I hired you. And when I found out, I didn't know how to tell you. The money, Marcus said slowly. You paid for the treatment because they're your nieces and nephews, Victoria finished. Yes, and because I could. Because I've been tested and I'm a perfect match. Because our father failed both of us, but I won't fail them. A small voice from the bed made them all turn. Daddy? James's eyes were open, confused but alert. Why is everyone crying? Marcus was at his side in an instant, Victoria right beside him. Hey, buddy, you gave us a scare. How are you feeling? Tired, James said, then looked at Victoria. Are you my mommy now? The innocent question broke something in Victoria. No, sweetheart, but I am. I'm your Aunt Victoria. If that's okay? James considered this with 4-year-old seriousness. Does that mean you're Daddy's sister? Like Emma is Lily's sister? Yes, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. It means exactly that. Cool, James said simply. Can we still have dinner together? Despite everything, Marcus laughed, a broken, beautiful sound. Yeah, buddy, we can still have dinner together. Dr. Hernandez returned with treatment papers. We should begin the procedure as soon as possible. The donor will need to be admitted for preparation. I'm ready, Victoria said without hesitation. Whatever they need, however many times, I'm ready. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw him trying to reconcile the sister he'd never known existed with the woman he'd been falling for. Why? He asked. Why go through this for us? We're strangers, even if we share DNA. Because Lily was right, Victoria said, thinking of the wise little girl who'd seen the truth before any of them. We're pieces of a puzzle that finally found each other. And because maybe, just maybe, our father breaking 2 families apart led to us creating one together. Over the next 6 hours, as Victoria underwent preparation for the donation, Marcus didn't leave her side. They talked, really talked, about their childhoods, about Robert Sterling, about the parallel lives they'd lived never knowing the other existed. Emma and Lily stayed with James while the twins were brought to the hospital by the neighbor. When Noah and Nathan learned that Miss Sterling was actually their aunt, they'd high-fived each other. Does this mean we get to live in the penthouse forever? Nathan asked hopefully. It means your family, Victoria said, already feeling the effects of the pre-treatment medication. And family stays together. As they wheeled her into the procedure room, Marcus grabbed her hand. Victoria, I need you to know something. Before I knew we were siblings, I was. I had feelings. He couldn't finish, but she understood. The attraction between them, the connection they'd felt, it all made horrible, perfect sense now. They'd recognized each other on some cellular level, 2 halves of a broken family drawn together by invisible threads. I know, she said softly. Me too. But maybe this is better. Maybe this is what we were supposed to be. Family. Real family. Not. She didn't finish either. Couldn't. The procedure itself was straightforward but exhausting. When Victoria woke, all 5 children were in her room, having snuck past the nurses. James was in a wheelchair, already looking better after his first treatment. The twins had made her a get-well card that said, Best Aunt Ever, in glitter glue. Emma had drawn another picture, this one showing their whole family together, with Victoria right in the center, and Lily sat beside her bed, holding her hand with those small, warm fingers. Aunt Victoria, Lily said, testing out the title. I'm glad the puzzle is complete now. Me too, Victoria said, meaning it despite everything. Me too, sweetheart. Marcus stood in the doorway watching his children, their family, surround Victoria with love. The romantic love they'd started to feel would have to transform into something else, something perhaps even stronger. They were siblings, united by a father who'd failed them both but had inadvertently given them each other. "Thank you," he said simply, "for saving them, for saving us." Victoria looked at him, her brother, and saw their father's eyes looking back at her with none of his cowardice, none of his weakness. Marcus had stayed. Marcus had loved. Marcus had chosen family over everything else, and now so would she. "So, we saved each other," she said, and realized it was true. The Sterling family was whole again, just not in any way Robert Sterling could have imagined. Before we reveal the shocking truth about Robert Sterling's past and the real reason he abandoned both his families, remember to subscribe if you're moved by stories of redemption and family bonds that transcend circumstances. 2 months had passed since the revelation that changed everything. Victoria had moved the entire Thompson family into her penthouse, converting half of the 40th floor into a warm, chaotic living space that bore no resemblance to her former sterile environment. The treatments were working remarkably well. James had made a full recovery, and even the twins showed no signs of the syndrome progressing. But tonight, everything they thought they knew about their father would shatter once again. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison Blackwell, sat across from Victoria and Marcus, in what used to be her pristine home office, now decorated with children's drawings and family photos. He held 2 sealed envelopes yellowed with age. "Your father wrote these letters 15 years ago," Mr. Blackwell said solemnly. "His instructions were very specific. They were only to be delivered when both his children were together, and only after you'd found each other on your own. He said you'd need to discover your connection without his interference, or you'd never believe what he had to tell you." Marcus scoffed. Typical Robert Sterling, still trying to control everything from beyond the grave. "There's something else," the lawyer continued, pulling out a thick folder. "This contains documentation about the Havelford syndrome in your family. Robert knew about it. He knew it would affect any children you might have, Marcus. It's why he trailed off, gesturing to the letters. "Perhaps you should read his words directly." Victoria took her envelope with trembling fingers, noting her name written in her father's careful script. Marcus held his like it might explode. They opened them together. Victoria read aloud, her voice shaking. "My dearest Victoria, if you're reading this, then you found Marcus, and you've likely discovered the burden our bloodline carries. I know you hate me. You have every right to. But before you close your heart entirely, know this. I left to save you both. The syndrome that runs in our family, I have it too. I was diagnosed when you were 7, and Marcus was 14. The doctors gave me 5 years at most. I couldn't bear for either of you to watch me waste away, to remember me weak and dying. So I became the villain instead. I chose to be hated rather than pitied." Marcus's letter contained different details but the same revelation. "My son, my firstborn, I watched you become a man from afar, proud of every accomplishment, heartbroken by every struggle. When your mother told me you'd married Sarah, I hired someone to watch over you to make sure you were happy. When your children were born, I had them tested immediately. When I learned they carried the syndrome, I began liquidating everything, converting my entire empire to cash to ensure they'd have treatment. Victoria's company, I helped fund it secretly through shell corporations. Every success she had, I made sure doors opened for her. Not because she wasn't brilliant enough on her own, but because I needed to ensure she'd have the resources to save your children when I was gone." Victoria's hands shook as she continued reading. "The connection between you and Marcus was not accidental. I spent years maneuvering, using my remaining influence to ensure your paths would cross." "The job posting," Marcus answered. "I arranged it through intermediaries. I knew that if you met naturally, if you discovered your bond without my poisonous presence, you might actually forge the family I destroyed. The treatments for Havelfords have advanced significantly. Victoria, by now you know you're a perfect match. You can save them all. Marcus, your children will live full, healthy lives because of your sister. The fortune I've left is held in trust, accessible only when you work together. Not because I want to control you, but because I want to ensure you have a reason to stay connected." The room was deadly silent as both siblings absorbed the magnitude of their father's revelation. He hadn't abandoned them out of selfishness. He'd orchestrated everything, even his own vilification, to save his grandchildren and reunite his broken family. "This is manipulation," Marcus said, his voice rough. "Even dying, even trying to help, he was still pulling strings." "Look at the medical files," Mr. Blackwell said quietly. They were extensive, dating back 20 years. Robert Sterling had indeed been diagnosed with Havelford's, had suffered for 3 years before going into unexpected remission, one of only 12 cases ever recorded. But by then, the damage to his families was done. He'd spent his remaining years building the fortune that would save his grandchildren and trying to engineer a reunion he'd never live to see. "There's a video," the lawyer said, pulling out a tablet. He recorded it a month before he died. The man on the screen was nothing like the powerful father Victoria remembered or the abandoning figure Marcus hated. Robert Sterling was gaunt, clearly dying, but his eyes, their eyes, burned with desperate intensity. "My children," he began, his voice weak but clear. "I know apologies mean nothing. I know I stole decades from you both. But if you're watching this together, then my final plan worked. You found each other. The grandchildren I never deserved to meet will live because of Victoria's gift and Marcus's love. I destroyed 2 families trying to protect you from watching me die. It was the wrong choice. I see that now. But from that destruction, I pray you've built something beautiful." The video, Robert continued. "Marcus, your mother was the love of my life. When she died 5 years ago, I wanted to reach out. But you'd already met Sarah, already started your beautiful family. You didn't need my shadow darkening your happiness. Victoria, your mother remarried well. Richard has been more of a father to you than I ever was. I'm grateful for that. In the safe behind this office's bookshelf, combination 0314, Marcus's birthday, you'll find everything. Every photo I collected of you both, every newspaper clipping, every report card I bribed schools to send me. Evidence of a father who loved from afar, too proud and too stupid to love up close." Victoria was crying now, and even Marcus had tears on his face. They'd hated him for so long, built their identities around being abandoned by Robert Sterling. To learn it had all been a twisted form of love, a misguided attempt at protection. It was too much to process. Lily appeared in the doorway, because of course she did. The little girl seemed to have a supernatural sense for emotional moments. "Aunt Victoria? Uncle Marcus? Why are you sad?" "We're learning about our father," Victoria said, pulling her niece into her lap. "Your grandfather, the one who left?" Lily asked with her characteristic directness. "It turns out," Marcus said slowly, "he left because he thought he was protecting us. He was sick and didn't want us to see him that way." Lily considered this with her beyond her years' wisdom. "That was stupid," she declared. "Being together when things are hard is what makes a family strong, like how we're all together now for James and everyone." Out of the mouths of babes, Victoria thought. A 6-year-old had more wisdom than their father had possessed. "You're absolutely right," she told Lily. "He made the wrong choice, but maybe we can make better ones." The safe did indeed exist, and its contents were overwhelming. Thousands of photos. Marcus at graduation, Victoria getting her first business award, Sarah and Marcus's wedding, each grandchild's birth announcement. He'd been there, hidden but present for everything. "He hired me," Marcus said suddenly, staring at a familiar face in one of the photos. "My mentor in construction, the one who taught me everything. He was one of Dad's employees. All those contracts that kept us afloat after Sarah died. They weren't luck, were they?" Victoria found her own revelations in the documents. The venture capitalist who'd first believed in her company, the board member who'd always supported her aggressive expansions, the competitor who'd inexplicably backed down from a crucial bid, all connected to Robert Sterling. "He never stopped being our father," Victoria said wonderingly. "He just did it badly. So badly. The money," Marcus said, finding bank documents. "It's not just for the kids' treatment. Victoria, it's $2 billion. Split equally, but only accessible if we both agree on any expenditure over $1 million. He's still controlling us," Victoria said, but without heat. "Still forcing us to be family." "No," Marcus said firmly. "We're choosing to be family. His manipulation might have brought us together, but what we've built, that's ours. The kids loving you, you saving them, us creating this chaotic, beautiful life, that's despite him, not because of him." Mr. Blackwell stood to leave but turned at the door. "There's one more thing. Robert owned a property in Connecticut, a family estate he never sold. He hoped you might take the children there. He had it maintained perfectly, updated everything for medical needs. It's yours now, both of yours." After the lawyer left, Victoria and Marcus sat in silence, processing everything. The children were all asleep, unaware that their grandfather, the villain of family lore, had been rewritten as a deeply flawed man who'd loved them all along. "I don't know how to feel," Marcus admitted. "I built so much of who I am on not being him. on being the father who stayed. You are the father who stayed, Victoria said firmly. His intentions might have been good, but his choices were wrong. You made the right ones. We, Marcus corrected. We made the right ones. You could have kept your distance when you found out we were siblings. You could have just written a check and walked away. But you stayed too. They were interrupted by footsteps. James padded in, dragging his favorite blanket. Can't sleep, he mumbled, crawling into Marcus's lap. Bad dream. What about, buddy? Marcus asked, smoothing his son's hair. Dreamed Aunt Victoria went away, James said, reaching for Victoria's hand. But that's silly, right? She's family. Family doesn't go away. Victoria and Marcus exchanged glances over James's head. Their father's greatest failure had been leaving. His children and grandchildren wouldn't repeat that mistake. That's right, Victoria said, squeezing James's small hand. I'm not going anywhere. Ever. Promise? James asked sleepily. With sprinkles on top? With sprinkles and chocolate chips and everything else you can imagine, Victoria confirmed. As James dozed off between them, Marcus said quietly, the estate in Connecticut. Maybe we should look at it. For the kids. Fresh air, good schools, room to run around. Together? Victoria asked. A real family compound, not my sterile penthouse? Together, Marcus confirmed. The way it should have been from the beginning. They sat there in the office that had revealed so many secrets, surrounded by evidence of their father's twisted love, holding a child who would never know abandonment. Robert Sterling had failed in life, but perhaps in death he'd given them something precious, the knowledge that love, however imperfect, was worth fighting for, and the understanding that family wasn't about blood or manipulation or grand gestures from afar. It was about showing up, staying close, and choosing each other over and over again. The next morning would bring decisions about the estate, the money, the future. But tonight they were simply a brother and sister who'd found each other against all odds, raising 5 extraordinary children who would never doubt they were loved, never wonder if they were worth staying for. Robert Sterling had orchestrated their meeting, but Victoria and Marcus had chosen their family, and that made all the difference. The Connecticut estate took their breath away. As Victoria drove the family van, she'd actually bought a minivan, something her old self would have found horrifying, through the gates. Even the perpetually chattering twins fell silent. The property sprawled across 50 acres of pristine landscape, with a main house that looked like something from a fairy tale, and a state-of-the-art medical facility discreetly built into the east wing. Robert Sterling hadn't just maintained it. He'd perfected it for the grandchildren he knew would one day need it. But it was what they found inside that would change everything one final time. Look at this place, Noah exclaimed, racing through the massive front door with Nathan close behind. It's like a castle. Emma walked more slowly, her artist's eye taking in every detail. It's beautiful, she breathed, like Mom would have loved. Marcus flinched at the mention of Sarah, and Victoria touched his arm gently. In the month since they'd discovered their connection, they'd developed their own language of comfort, of sibling support that felt both new and ancient. Lily, as always, went straight to the heart of things. She'd found the family portrait gallery, a hallway lined with paintings going back generations. But it was the newest additions that stopped them all cold. Paintings of Marcus and Victoria as children, together, in a life that never was. Their father had commissioned them, imagining the childhood his children should have shared. There they were at Christmas, birthdays, family vacations, a fantasy of siblinghood painted in oil and regret. He had these made 3 years ago, Lily read from a small plaque. It says, "The Sterling children, as they should have been." This is disturbing, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. The paintings were beautiful, haunting in their imagined tenderness. Or maybe just sad, Victoria countered, studying one that showed them as teenagers, Marcus teaching a young Victoria to drive. He spent his last years imagining what he'd thrown away, but it was the library that held the biggest surprise. Hidden behind a false panel, they found Robert's real office. Not the corporate showcase in the main house, but a small, warm room wallpapered with photos and children's drawings. Not their childhood drawings, but sketches Robert himself had made. Hundreds of them, dating back decades. Drawings of baby Marcus, of toddler Victoria, of moments he'd missed, birthdays he'd skipped, Christmases he'd avoided. And in the center of the desk, a letter marked, "Open only after you've decided to stay." Victoria opened it, her hands steady now. They'd made their decision the moment they'd seen the medical facility, the children's playrooms, the perfect blend of luxury and warmth. This would be their home. "My beloved children," Victoria read aloud. The family gathered around her. If you're reading this, you've decided to make the estate your home, I'm glad. It was always meant for family, for the life we should have lived. But I have one last truth to share, one that explains everything and nothing all at once. The letter continued. The Havelford syndrome didn't come from our bloodline randomly. My grandfather, your great-grandfather, was a scientist who worked with genetic modification in its earliest days. He thought he was creating immunity to certain diseases. Instead, he created a genetic marker that would surface generations later. I've spent my fortune not just treating the syndrome but funding research to end it forever. Victoria, your company's AI technology, which I helped guide you toward, holds the key. Marcus, your children aren't just patients. They're the last generation who will suffer from this. The research team in Switzerland, funded by our family trust, is months away from a permanent cure, a genetic therapy that will end Havelfords forever. Victoria's mind raced. Her AI company, the medical application she'd been developing, it hadn't been coincidence. Even her career had been partly orchestrated, guided toward this moment. He played the longest game imaginable, she said quietly. 3 generations of planning to fix one man's mistake. But he fixed it, Lily said, ever practical. Or helped fix it. We're all here, we're all getting better, and now no other kids will get sick like us. That's good, right? From a 6-year-old's perspective, it really was that simple. The adults exchanged glances over her head, acknowledging the complexity Lily couldn't yet grasp, but choosing her simple truth anyway. They explored the rest of the house, finding wonder after wonder. A music room with a piano that had belonged to Marcus's mother. A laboratory for Lily, somehow Robert had known she'd need intellectual stimulation. An art studio with north-facing windows for Emma. A workshop where the twins could build and create. A playroom filled with every toy James could imagine. And for the adults, adjoining suites that gave them privacy while keeping the family close. He knew us, Emma said softly, running her fingers over professional art supplies that were exactly what she'd dreamed of. Grandfather knew who we'd become. He watched us, Marcus corrected but gently. He paid attention from afar. Maybe that's a kind of love too, Nathan suggested. Not the best kind, but still love. As the children scattered to explore their new domains, Victoria and Marcus found themselves on the back terrace, looking out over grounds that stretched to the horizon. We're really doing this, Marcus said. Moving here, raising them together, being a family in the house our father built for the family he broke. Is it wrong that it feels right anyway? Victoria asked. Despite everything, all his manipulation, all his mistakes, this feels like home. Sarah would have loved it, Marcus said suddenly, the first time he'd mentioned his late wife without pain clouding his voice. She always wanted the kids to have space to run, to grow. She would have wanted this for them. Then we're honoring her too, Victoria said. And maybe that's what family is, taking all the broken pieces, the mistakes, the ghosts, the love, and building something new. A year later, the cure was announced. Victoria's AI algorithms had cracked the genetic code. The Swiss team had developed the therapy, and Havelford syndrome would die with this generation. The Thompson Sterling children were among the first to receive the permanent cure, their futures finally fully secured. The press conference was held at the estate with Victoria and Marcus standing together as siblings, as business partners, as co-parents to 5 extraordinary children who would never know the fear of a genetic sword hanging over their heads. Mr. Thompson, Ms. Sterling, a reporter asked, your father orchestrated all of this. Your meeting, your company's direction, this cure. How do you feel about his manipulation now? Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances. Years of shared understanding in that look. Our father made terrible choices, Marcus said carefully. He chose distance over presence, control over trust. But from his failures, we learned how to succeed. We chose to stay, to be present, to trust each other, and these amazing kids. The cure isn't his legacy, Victoria added, pulling James onto her lap as he tugged at her dress. These children are. The family we've built is. The love we choose every day is. That's what matters. As the reporters dispersed and the sun set over their estate, the family gathered in what had become their favorite spot, a massive sectional sofa in the living room where they all fit together, a tangle of limbs and love and belonging. Tell us a story, Aunt Victoria, Emma requested, settling against her side. About what? Victoria asked, though she knew what was coming. It was their new ritual, their way of processing their strange, beautiful history. About the family puzzle, James said, using Lily's metaphor that had become family shorthand for their journey. about how all the pieces found each other. So Victoria told the story, with Marcus adding details, the children interrupting with their own memories, how a lonely CEO had hired a desperate single father, how 5 extraordinary children had taught 2 broken adults to love, how a sister and brother had found each other across decades of separation, how a father's failures had led to a family's triumph, how love, in all its imperfect forms, had won in the end. And what happened next? Lily asked, though she knew the answer. They lived, Victoria said, kissing the top of her niece's brilliant head. They lived and loved and stayed together, always. Even when things got hard? Noah asked. Especially when things got hard, Marcus confirmed, thinking of their father's greatest mistake. Because that's what family does. As the children dozed off one by one, Victoria and Marcus carried them to their beds in the home their father had prepared, but they had made their own. The ghosts of Robert Sterling's manipulations would always linger, but they'd been transformed into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. He'd been wrong to leave, wrong to manipulate, wrong to choose distance over presence. But in his wrongness, he'd created the possibility for something right. 5 children, who would live full, healthy lives. 2 siblings who'd found each other against all odds. A family forged not from perfection, but from choosing to stay, to love, to build something beautiful from broken pieces. The estate in Connecticut stood as testament to the complex truth that love could be both corrupted and redemptive, that families could be both broken and whole, that sometimes the greatest gifts came wrapped in the deepest pain. And in the master suite she'd claimed as her own, Victoria Sterling, no longer the Ice Queen, no longer alone, stood at her window watching the moon rise over the grounds where her nieces and nephews would grow up surrounded by love. Somewhere, she thought, their father was finally at peace, knowing that his children had succeeded where he had failed. They had chosen each other. They had chosen to stay. And that, more than any cure, more than any fortune, more than any carefully orchestrated plan, was the true miracle. 2 abandoned children, grown into adults who refused to abandon anyone, raising 5 extraordinary souls who would never doubt they were worth staying for. The Sterling Thompson family was complete, not because Robert Sterling had planned it, but because Victoria and Marcus had chosen it, fought for it, and would continue choosing it every single day for the rest of their lives. Love, they'd learned, wasn't about perfect plans or grand gestures or control from afar. It was about showing up, especially when it was hard. It was about staying, especially when leaving would be easier. It was about choosing family, blood or otherwise, over and over again. And that choice, that daily, ordinary, extraordinary choice, was the greatest fortune of all.